People of the universe, welcome back to the Who Even Are We podcast with Pat and Taylor.
Hello, hello.
Hey everyone. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's podcast, we did want to address why there was no Thursday episode last week. So I guess we'll just go ahead and do that from the jump here. There was a death in the family. And I don't think either of us were really in the mood for a podcast after that.
Honestly, we kind of forgot because we were trying to get plans sorted to go home to Memphis. So
It's kind of one of those where that took precedence. So no Thursday episode, but rest assured there will be a Thursday episode this week. So just note, here in the next few weeks, there might be an episode or two missed because our niece is due to make her appearance here in the next couple weeks. So
yeah,
we'll be
2 weeks.
We'll be taking a trip back home within the next 2 to 4 weeks. If we're smart about it, we'll record in advance, but we'll see what happens.
Sometimes we're not so smart.
Sometimes we're not so smart. But we wanted to address that on the front end here to just kind of get that elephant out of the room. Appreciate everybody being understanding. And to those of you who had listened to the Mandela Effect podcast, I was checking the numbers on the car ride home today, and it's doing pretty good so far. So we really appreciate the time you take out of your day to listen to us talk about stuff that we might not be qualified to talk about.
We appreciate you listening to little old us.
Yeah, it's a little old Taylor and I. So, no, we do really appreciate everybody who's listening, whether it's on Spotify or YouTube. Of course, you can catch us on either one of those. More updates to come as far as video with the podcast and guest. That is something we're working out as we speak. So, more to come on those topics. Well, being that it's a Tuesday, let's go ahead and jump into that Gizmo update.
Gizmo. So, when I found out that we were going to be going home, I really wanted to make something, which is a little bit difficult because I usually only make anything on the weekends just because all sourdough things take at least 24 hours to make. And I'm talking like a pretty active 24 hours, so it's not like, it's just difficult. So I did end up making a traditional loaf, and it's actually, I think, my first one that came out really well. It's still a little dense, but we're all eating it, which is a plus because all the ones I've made so far, nobody ate. So this one turned out really good, and my mom and grandmother both said that it looked like it came out of a store. So dust off my shoulder, be proud of that. But yeah, so that's really Gizmo update. Oh, I did introduce you guys to Gizmo on TikTok. So if you
downloaded the app before it was taken off the App Store.
Yeah, that's also true. If
Go
you already
check that
have
out.
the app, look us up.
Who Even Are We
Who Even-
podcast.
We literally just got back from Memphis, and I'm like tired.
Yeah, we got back maybe half an hour ago.
Yeah. So look us up on TikTok, and I introduce you guys to Gizmo so that you can put I was gonna say a face to the name, but he's in a jar. So,
Hypothetically speaking.
and you'll see the loaf that I made for our family in Memphis. So,
I really need to get on Instagram and start making posts on there.
yeah, we have 2 videos on TikTok.
Yeah.
One is me, basically, what the heck is this? Who are we? What are we even doing? Who even are we? And I kind of pinned that, so it'll always be the first video that people see. And then Gizmo is our second one. Just being like, hey, this is the thing that we talk about every single podcast. Here he is.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
We got bread.
We got bread.
Which is cool. Well, being that it is a Tuesday episode, we all know what that means. It's time for the record of the week. This record I picked because, honestly, it's one of my favorites from this particular group. And the story behind the record, for those who don't know, is a really cool story. So this week, the record of the week, which was released on April 12th, 2011, was recorded between September 6th and December 21st of 2010, is Wasting Light by the Foo Fighters. The singles from this record, starting with the first one, Rope came out March 1st, 2011. White Limo came out March 28th, 2011. Walk came out June 17th, 2011. Alandria came out September 18th, 2011. These Days, November 1st, 2011. And Bridge Burning, June 5th, 2012. Really cool factoid about this record. There is a documentary that goes with this record that will actually show you this. But this entire record not only was recorded on analog equipment, so the old school way, but it was all recorded at a frontman Dave Grohl's home. So they pretty much built a home studio and recorded arguably their best record there. It's a very, very good one. I highly recommend checking it out. It's about 50 minutes long, so it's a relatively short record, but it is full of great songs, and it's a great listen front to back.
I realize what you're doing with your voice.
Radio announcer, sports announcer.
Yes, you are basically radio DJing it.
I'm a used car salesman. But again, really great record. Highly recommend listening to it. It was also produced by Butch Vig, the guy who produced Nevermind for Nirvana.
What songs did you say were on it?
Bridge Burning, White Limo, Rope, Walk, Alandria, These Days. But there's a lot of really good songs on this particular record. I'm pulling up the track listing. My personal favorite would probably be These Days or White Limo. White Limo is a fun song.
These Days is the only one that I recognize.
I Should Have Known is a very good song too. But that whole record is fantastic. So definitely recommend checking it out, especially if you're a fan of that alternative type music. So this week, record of the week is Wasting Light by the Foo Fighters. So,
yep.
Moving forward into the meat and potatoes of today's episode. So before we get into it, I want to warn everybody there's going to be spoilers in this episode for a particular TV show that Taylor and I watched, and I guess you could say are watching. Because we thought we watched the first season today. Turns out we watched season 2.
Yeah.
Well, not today, just we found out today that we watched season 2, which just came out, and season 1's been out since 2023, so we'll have to go back and watch.
Did you figure out where season 1 was?
I didn't look back into it.
Because we watched it on Hulu?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, fair warning, there are going to be spoilers. If you are interested in watching this show, I highly recommend clicking off of the podcast now, but if not, and you've already watched it, or you're just curious about our take, here goes nothing. So, the topic of today's episode is the Goosebumps TV series, which we saw on Hulu. I don't know what it released on originally, but
yeah,
particularly season 2. When you're in the car for 5 hours, y'all, it does a number on your brain.
Yeah, I didn't realize how tired I was until we sat down.
That's why I was like, let's go ahead and knock this out, because if you go lay down, it's game over.
Also, I just want to point out, we've been home for less than 30 minutes. I'm unpacked. It's a Christmas miracle.
I'm not.
Because usually I live out of my suitcase for the next 2 weeks.
Month.
So, I did all that work, unpacked it, and we're just going to have to leave again.
In a couple weeks, at minimum. So, we are going to be talking about season 2 of the Goosebumps series. Now, the reason why we watched this, I just saw that they had come out with something like that, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. So I was like, let's just check it out. And we ended up watching it and liking it. She's looking up the name of...
Because it's not just Goosebumps. The Vanishing.
The Vanishing. Okay.
Goosebumps The Vanishing.
That's interesting. I mean, I guess it makes sense. So this is pretty much in a nutshell, this is a horror series. based off of R.L. Stein's Goosebumps books. And she's making a face over there. I think she's reading something.
It said the first episode was released on January 10th
Of this year.
of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So they've already released 2 seasons?
I guess they released them all at once.
Are you...
They released... Season 1 came out in 2023, and it was a different... It was a different beast, and it's a different story altogether.
Was it a different cast, too?
I assume so.
Well, then it's not the same show.
Well, you know what? It's fine. We're talking about season 2 of the series today.
Anyway,
so.
we're talking about Goosebumps: The Vanishing with David, the like movie poster, whatever you want to call it, is David Schwimmer and his head exploding, aka Ross from Friends.
Yeah, so let's get into that first. So I didn't realize Ross was in the series until we started watching it, and I was like, oh man, this is hard to watch.
I don't know how you didn't realize that was him on the cover.
I didn't pay that close attention to the cover.
Yeah.
And then I saw it after the fact, and I was like, oh yeah, that is
It
Ross.
was really... Because I am actively rewatching Friends right now. So it was a little weird to, like, go from watching him from, like...
a more comedy role.
20 years ago? 30 years ago. Anyway, to now.
Yeah.
And it was funny because it's a lot of the same humor. Like, I just feel like they took Ross from Friends and just put him in this show.
But instead of a paleontologist, he was a
Botanist. Which is the study of plants.
That was it's like, wow. And then he had 2 children, a boy and a girl.
Should have named them Emma and
You're gonna get it.
hold on. Gosh, what's his name?
Now you're making me blank on his name. Oh my god.
What the
Jack was
heck?
the father. Jack was Ross's dad.
Yeah. Ben.
There it is.
I was like, what is happening right now?
Instead, we got Devin and Cece, who are kind of the main protagonists of the show.
Yeah.
So, getting into the background of the show, essentially, the show opens up in the 90s, which I thought this was going to be a 90s-based show, but it wasn't, which is fine. But the show opens in the 90s, and it's a group of teens going to a place called Camp Nightmare, where in the story the government did testing on humans. It wasn't like... It was kind of like one of those old wives' tales almost. Like, yeah, you can't go there. They did this. The military used to do this there.
It's kind of like the same lore of, like... So, back in my hometown, there's rumors that if you go to the cemetery and you stay there at midnight, the eyes on the angel will move. Or whatever.
And I'm just now finding out about this.
Yeah,
We
I
were just
forgot.
30 minutes away from it.
About it.
Could have been there. Could have been there like freaking Zach Bagans, just like, all right, I feel really dark spirit here.
If you stare at something long enough, it's going to move. Your brain's going to tell you it's moving. So, there is that.
Yeah, I think that's a medical condition. Anyways, getting off topic
being
here.
Tired.
So it opens up with them going to Camp Nightmare, and Ross, and this is when we're going to keep calling him Ross, not David. That's just what he's known as. So David Schwimmer's the younger version of his character, he follows his brother to the place and was warning his brother, like, hey, this is not a good idea, blah, blah, blah. And then a machine gets turned on, and all of the kids vanish except for 2. One of them being Ross, and another one being a character named Jen, who also plays a big part in the storyline going forward. And then you fast forward about 20-ish years, and it is David Schwimmer's kids in the show coming to stay with him for the summertime. As previously mentioned, Devin and Cece are the children's names. I want to point out a continuity error here. Just going to point it out. It's supposed to take place in the summer, and that scene in the beginning of the show where Ross is picking up Emma and Ben, where I can't think.
Cece and Devin.
Cece and Devin are being picked up by their dad, whose name I can't think of right now.
And
Anthony.
Anthony.
So Anthony is picking up Cece and Devin, and if you look at the trees in the back, there is no leaves on the trees.
I've never been to Brooklyn.
Or New York, period.
I've been to the state
Well,
of
you've
New
been to
York.
the state of New York, yeah.
But I assume that in the summertime they have leaves.
I think it's a fair assumption that they probably have leaves. Actually, fact I heard a long time ago is the leaves in like Central Park turn at a different time than the leaves everywhere else because of all the heat radiating off the buildings. So autumn happens either a little bit earlier or a little bit later there. I can't remember.
Interesting.
That may not be true, so please take that with a grain of salt.
I mean, it makes sense.
It does. I mean, it's a theory that really does make sense. So, continuity error, there were no leaves on the trees, and I was like, they did not film this scene in the summertime, but whatever. But it opened up there, and basically, the kids, Cece and Devin, go to this park to meet up with some old friends, because I guess they used to live in that neighborhood before their parents split up and mom made it big in the city, so to speak. So they're out there hanging out, and one of the asshole protagonist characters, can't think of his name. Antagonist, yeah. I mean, he became a protagonist, though.
He was back and forth the whole show.
He dared Devin to go to Camp Nightmare, and the machine got turned on, and all hell broke loose.
Yep.
And so throughout the show, you see, it's kind of like Stranger Things in a sense, where the adults, especially in season 1, the adults are trying to figure something out, and the kids are trying to figure that same thing out, and then at some point they converge and they all figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's how this show played out. And so the episode 1 pretty much ends with Devin fighting off this beast, and the beast can shapeshift. So it started out as a plant. That's what it took the shape of. And then throughout the show, it made its way into Cece's kombucha. It made its way to be what's his name's car. It was a lot of things.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are horror fans but don't like a lot of gore, I think this is a good choice for you. Because it's not particularly gory. There's not like a lot of blood and guts.
No, I mean, the scene where David Schwimmer like pulls it out of his arm,
that was
is
intense.
A little bit of gross.
Yeah, that scene was a little bit much.
But apart from that, yeah, there really wasn't much. And that was early on. So when that came across, I was like,
episode 2 or 3.
What are we in for? And then when his eye falls out or whatever.
Oh, yeah. The special effects in it were really good.
Yeah.
I thought that's something I give them credit for. The special effects were done really well. The story itself was done really well.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So I never, like, Goosebumps was a book series?
Yes, R.L. Stine book series.
Okay. Did you ever get into it?
No.
And it's been movies and stuff before, hasn't it?
They've done a lot of stuff based off of R.L. Stine.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, here we go again. Just like Deadpool and Wolverine were watching things without knowing the background.
Well, I think it was based off of one of the stories that he wrote. So I don't know if there's a continuation of this. And I think that's why the season 1 is a different story. Because they were really... R.L. Stine was really written towards, like, tweens and teenagers.
Yeah.
And so he could only get away with so much when writing for that audience. Not to say that adults won't enjoy it too. I'm just saying I think that's kind of the target audience R.L. Stine was going for. I don't know what R.L. stands for. Richard Lee is my guess. She's Googling.
Looks like he would write these kind of books.
Oh,
Robert Lawrence.
I was not close.
How do we not guess Robert?
I don't know. Richard, I guess, thinking of Friends. And so that's kind of the opening to the series, and in almost like Breakfast Club fashion, these four characters get together, or these 4 or 5 characters. How many characters were there? There was Cece, Devin, douchebag guy, the chick, the other chick, so 5. Oh, delivery driver. And so they're all like high school aged, and you kind of like, as the story develops, their character development kind of grows too. So for example, Cece was that she came to stay at Anthony's house, her dad's house. Her dad was taking care of their elderly grandmother who had dementia, and she was there because she was going to debate camp. But as the story progressed, you find out she didn't get into debate camp.
Yeah.
And then, so, like, Devin, his background was, just kind of a trouble kid who liked to fight, which I related with. I was like, I like this kid.
But it's also odd because he doesn't come across that way.
No.
Like, he'll throw some hands if he needs to. It seems like, but
to me, he just was a kid that
misunderstood.
Yeah, if he was born in the 90s, he'd be a pop punk kid, 100%.
Yeah.
The douchebag. We should probably look at these people's names.
I just had it too, and then I forgot. You have CJ.
Wasn't that.
That's the delivery guy.
CJ was the delivery guy, and Isaiah. Was it Isaiah?
It doesn't show me all the characters.
Frankie? It had to have been Isaiah, who is the douchebag character. That's for sure him.
Isaiah?
Yeah, his name was Isaiah. They may have called him Zay or something.
Maybe it was.
It was. It 100% was.
Okay.
So Isaiah, his character arc was interesting. So to get into him a little bit, when you saw him, he was that, like,
know-it-all. I run this town. I've got the girl. My dad is close to the police.
You can't touch me.
You can't touch me.
And
those kind of people I don't like.
In the show, he got possessed, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Overtaken by this entity.
Yeah.
And
by the goo.
And once he made it out of that situation, which, by the way, how he got out of that situation was really rad because they dropped a fucking car on him. Thought that was cool. It was his car nonetheless. Once he got out of that situation, they hospitalized him, and pretty much he comes out and was like a completely new person.
He couldn't really remember a whole lot. I think it was like starting to come back to him in pieces. But overall, he couldn't remember a whole lot. And he was like, I just want to start fresh. I'm sorry for being a douchebag to all you guys. And yeah, So
he had a very, comparing it to Stranger Things, he had a Steve story arc.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because Steve, when you saw him in Stranger Things in season 1, huge asshole. Like, huge dick. And then his character just built and built and built, and now people love him. Nanny Steve. So the same thing kind of happened with Isaiah's story arc. CJ's story arc stayed pretty consistent.
He was just like
the goofball.
Screw up.
But I think, again, misunderstood, and he wanted to show people, like, hey, I'm worthwhile and I can do good things.
Quit eating people's food.
Yeah. That was kind of a running theme in the show. He was a delivery driver, and he would show up, and people would be like, "Is there an egg roll missing?" And he's like, "No, there's one for me and one for you," which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
But he also was the kind of the boy who cried wolf type character. But his character stayed consistent throughout the show. I think he was a fan favorite. Who was the girl who was on the ankle monitor, but somehow was not on house arrest?
She looks just like the girl from Friday Night Lights. Curly hair.
I'm looking at it right now. Was that Frankie?
No. That was Douchebag's girlfriend.
Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about her. Yeah, that poor girl was I think he was a character after Taylor's own heart in a way.
What, Torn?
Torn wasn't sure who she was quite yet. What is this girl? Alex? I think Alex is right.
Yeah.
It was definitely Alex.
Yeah.
So anytime you want to jump in and talk about their story arcs, you
Well,
can.
I didn't realize we were going to literally tell the show.
Well, I'm just talking about the characters at this point. So
She was kind of like, she was the misunderstood bad girl. So her mom was a cop,
was Jen.
which is ironic. She had gotten into, I guess, some trouble in the past. And you get into it, I think it was like several episodes in, where you find out the truth as to why she was having to do community service and why her and her mom were button heads. Evidently, she was framed for starting a fire, starting a building fire. So she was having to do community service and stuff, and then she got in trouble again for pretty much the same thing. And that's when she got the ankle monitor on. Once again, it wasn't her fault. But because she was already pre-labeled as like
troubled,
no good, a lot of the other characters had a hard time trusting her. And her character was complex because like we're seeing all the backstory and that like none of this is true. Now she's like accepted, I guess, that she's the quote bad girl, because like when you try to convince people for who knows how long that's not you, you kind of give up. So that's kind of what it felt like watching her character.
She was the Billy.
Yeah.
Again, using the strange, because the series reminded me a lot of Stranger Things in that the writing style and how everything played out.
Yeah.
I would compare her to Billy, where Billy was this bad rebel guy.
Yeah.
You know, devil may care type person, but when his story arc happened, he stepped up and did what was right.
Right.
And so people loved Billy after that.
She was the one who, in this series, realized that something was wrong with the car.
Yeah.
Granted, she did steal the car.
She didn't steal it, she borrowed it.
Okay. Well, she borrowed the car, and then the car ended up being possessed and drove itself. And she was trying to convey that to her friend group, and they, of course, naturally, like,
Haha, whatever.
didn't believe her. And so that's how she kind of got looped into the whole, like, the Goosebumps side of it, I guess, is what we'll call that.
The situation.
Like, that something's happening.
And then finally, the last character development was really Cece, because the girlfriend was just torn. Like, she was kind of a middleman, like, between, like, doing what's right and, you know, whatever. Cece's character development was interesting, too. She was the perfectionist.
Goody two-shoes, perfectionist, straight A student, probably, like,
Ivy League bound.
captain of everything.
Dean's List, honor roll, whatever you want to call it.
So she, like you said, she was going to go to debate camp, and everybody thought she was going to debate camp, but she didn't have the heart to tell her parents and her brother that she didn't make it, because once you've been like the perfectionist and you've been the one that always succeeds, it's hard to
Admit when you
admit
fail.
failure. So,
Which she eventually does admit that
yeah.
in a very sad fashion. She admits that.
Yeah.
And that was a scene that stuck out to me, was when she did that, where she told Devin, like, hey, I didn't get in. And Devin was like, I'm not, like, you think I'm disappointed in you? Like, it's the first time we felt they were twins. We forgot to mention that. He basically just was like, it's okay. Things happen. And I think that was just kind of like a light switch to her when she was like, you know what? Maybe I didn't get in, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And she started to learn who she was and discovered herself. Because in the show, especially in the early episodes, she was shown as kind of this prissy type person.
Yeah.
Like, she would hang out with the other people who were higher class, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And you really come to discover that that's just not her. Like, so that's who she thought she ran with, but then she found this group of outcasts and she fit in. They treated her
Like a normal human
like
being.
a normal person and didn't care that she was the smartest person in the room. Like the other didn't. I guess she felt like she didn't have to prove herself to them.
Yeah.
Whereas the other friend group, she really did.
Yeah.
And so with that, those are kind of the main characters. We didn't talk about Jen too much. Jen, who is Alex's mom, was the other person who survived
The
original disappearance.
Yeah.
So Jen and Anthony discovered, hey, something's weird's going on here. And that's when their story started. And the kids were also investigating, like, everything that was going on. And, like, the concept of the story was pretty detailed. And so we keep talking about this entity, this being, and a couple things that I noticed just getting into that part of it. The being, or the ship, as they called it, was from another world.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were some scenes, like the scene where they're in the subway and the elevator at that apartment, their mom's apartment. Like, this is going to be unless you're like a big horror fan or nut, you probably won't put this connection together, but those scenes were very reminiscent of The Blob, which is a movie that came out in the 50s, a horror film that came out in the 50s with Steve McQueen. And basically the Blob came from another planet and was devouring people and trying to survive. And those scenes in particular, like, you had that blob-like figure.
Yeah. It looked like slime.
And I was like, they definitely took inspiration from that, because it looks just like it. Just not CGI. The blob itself in the movie was an actual, like, thing of slime. And the town where they filmed the blob, apparently, I don't know if they still do it, but Cinemassacre did a video on it years and years and years ago. They have Blobfest every year, and they celebrate the movie, because it was like a small town.
Yeah.
And they celebrate the movie, and the theater that was in the movie is still existing in that town, and they show the movie in that theater where those scenes happened.
Cool.
And the original blob, the prop they used to shoot that, they still have it. And that it makes an appearance too. So that just reminded me a lot of that. And you know, it's kind of funny I think it was in, there's another horror movie. I can't think of which one it is, but there's a scene where somebody's watching TV in the horror movie and they're watching the movie The Blob. But that part really reminded me of that, so that really stuck out to me, and I was like, that's a really cool, I don't know if they did that intentionally, but if they did, that's a really cool homage to classic horror.
Well, it's like, I guess because we're human, we can't help but like compare it to other things we've seen. Because I guess that's our way of trying to understand it. Because like the plant portion of it reminded me of Jumanji
Oh yeah,
for some reason. I guess when the vines took over in Jumanji. But yeah, I've never seen the Blob, so I can't relate to that. But
we should add that to this year's Halloween watch list. I mean, it's
the list.
it's by today's standards goofy as hell,
Yeah.
but 50 standards, really cool movie.
Trying to think of anything else that. When you mentioned Stranger Things, I feel like Ghostbusters is relatable too.
I don't see that one.
You don't see it? I don't know, because it's like goofy things that don't make sense.
But there were no ghosts.
Ghostbusters isn't just ghosts. I thought they had a blob in theirs too.
Plasma, yeah. Ectoplasma.
I don't know. You didn't think of Ghostbusters when they had to put those weird suits on? The hazmat suits, I guess, what they were.
I thought of Stranger Things.
Oh,
Because when they go into the Upside Down, they
That's
wear the
true.
same suits.
that's fair.
And so throughout the story, we find out that there is pretty much a researcher who was the last surviving from the actual, like, when everything was discovered. And she was the one trying to keep the creature at bay, the ship at bay. And then it cut back to the 60s where her dad, her, and 2 or 3 other scientists were trying to figure out a way to, like, get rid of this.
Yeah.
And they were successful until they weren't. And so she had spent years coming up with a serum to counteract the effects of the ship.
Well, they were successful until they got greedy.
Because they went straight for the ship.
Her dad wanted to get rid of it because they didn't know what it could do.
They thought it was going to take over the world.
Yeah. And then when they found out that they could essentially freeze it and get rid of it, the female researcher was like, "No, we're scientists. We're here to like figure it out."
She was big on, I'm a scientist, not a soldier.
Yeah. And
I think that's an exact quote, too.
She kind of talked with the other crew members and talked them into basically keeping it around and doing more tests. And that backfired.
Because ultimately, it got all of them, too.
The ship, yeah. The ship got all of them. The ship is essentially the creature.
Yes, the ship, when we say the ship, the blob, it's the creature in the show. And so the story moves on, and they find out Jen, I guess, hid evidence.
Mm-hmm.
She had the tape, because they were filming a video. So the whole reason why the teens in the 90s went to Camp Nightmare is I guess their high school seniors always did a dare every year, and that was the dare they chose to do. And so they were going to sleep overnight at Camp Nightmare before the events happened. And Jen, I guess, had hid the videotape. She had it and hid it. And then basically the police just said they drowned or something. And she gave the tape to Anthony, not knowing Anthony was at this point possessed by the creature.
Mm-hmm.
And Cece and Devin found the tape and they watched it and saw what happened and found the scientist who like did a lot of undercover work too. Like she went into the hospital while Isaiah was in the hospital and pretended to be like a pediatric doctor. Yeah. But really she was just like, all right, is this kid real or is this the stuff?
Yeah, I think she's trying to help get rid of the goo, the being, the alien, the ship, whatever you want to call it at this point.
And so the kids, they kind of start putting pieces together and realize, like, hey, we've seen this woman in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And so they find her lab, and at this point, like we said, Anthony was possessed and is in, we didn't talk about this yet, but was in a cocoon, so to speak. I don't remember what they called them, a chamber. Basically, when the ship took somebody over, it put them in this chamber that put them in like a dreamlike state.
Mm-hmm. Pod.
Pod, that's what it was. It put them into this pod, and so she was trying to minimize the damage that the ship did, but she wasn't trying to save the people in the pods. She was just trying to save her dad, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so they found her, and she helped them try to get her Anthony out of the pod. Well, she kind of double-crossed them. And so when they finally got out of the underground laboratory, Anthony was able to free pretty much everybody in the pods, including his brother, who was dead.
Yeah.
Presumed dead. So it was his brother and their friends, and they pretty much stayed the same. Like, their hair didn't grow. They were still that 17, 18-year-old self when he was in his 40s or 50s in the show. You know, getting into the ending of the show here, basically, they freed all these people from the pod, but the people he freed were actually, like, they were the aliens. And so they started changing into their alien form.
Yeah, because you only have, from what I gathered, you only have X amount of time in the pod before it basically can.
It's
like
game over.
You're no longer there.
Right.
Like, nobody's home. So, Anthony, aka David Schwimmer, aka Ross, was able to go back to his original self because he had only been in there for like
a day,
24 hours maybe,
something like that.
So of course they didn't realize when he was able to free his brother and the rest of his friends that was the case, and that within a few hours,
however long, they would switch back
aliens.
And so essentially the show ended. Jen and Anthony, I guess, didn't all the kids get taken into pods?
Yes.
So all the kids, not from the 90s, but the like CC and Devin and all them all got stuck in pods, and they were like, well, we got to go save them. And so they went down there, and on their way down there, they were taking out all these creatures, and they were able to save their kids. And it comes to find out that, like, hey, the pod isn't trying to possess people, it's just trying to defend itself. It wants to leave. It was locked underground.
Yeah.
They were like, it's trying to get out of here. So they figured that out. They went down and rescued all of them, including the kids from the 90s, which one of them, again, was his brother and Jen's boyfriend in high school. And something happens. I think he gets shocked or something and gets knocked back. I can't remember that exact part, but he gets knocked out somehow, and he starts to come to, and his brother's like, there's no place for me here.
Mm-hmm.
Don't follow me. I'm going with them. Because they were just, that's their life now.
Yeah.
And so all the people that were in the pods went with the aliens as they left the planet. And everything was returned to normal.
Yeah.
So it was a really cool ending. A lot of times you'll see shows like that where the thing gets destroyed. In this case, it was just like, it reminds me of that Encounter. It's the movie we watched a couple years ago with the crescent-shaped shift.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They were trying to communicate with the beings and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had like a really positive ending.
Well, it left on a cliffhanger.
It did leave on a cliffhanger. So the end of the show, the end of the final episode, Cece and Devin are moving back to their moms. And Devin reveals, like, hey, I'm going to go to school here. And they start dating, what's her face? The love triangle girl. Frankie. So they start dating, and he was basically like, hey, I'm not going back to the private school. I'm going to go to your high school for senior year. And his sister ended up going back to the private school, but started dating
Alex.
Alex. I guess they was in love.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, at this point in the show, it looks like summertime. So, like somebody could have said, "Oh, this is August." I would have been like, "All right, yeah, I gotcha."
But the show basically ends on you see Isaiah walking up his porch steps, and he like pauses for a second, and he like throws up, essentially.
Yeah, throws up the goop.
The goo. So, and then it like goes dark.
It's kind of like in Venom at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home. A little piece of Venom got left in that universe.
Oh, yeah.
So it reminded me of that. But no, yeah, it ended on that cliffhanger, but it was cool that they left the door open, because I think they casted that very well.
Mm.
Like the teenagers were actual teenagers. They weren't like 28 years old and just looked young, or they might be. I really don't know, but still. It ended really well. Like I really enjoyed the show. I really enjoyed it. What would you rank that show on like a scale of 1 to 10?
A 6 or a 7?
I think that's fair.
Because like it was a really good show. Not necessarily my thing, like not something that I would have sought out. But it was like you've been saying, it was really well like put together and fairly easy to follow. Just like I said, not necessarily my thing.
It wasn't your bag.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have picked it out.
Probably not. I probably would have watched it because David Schwimmer was in it.
Yeah, if you saw that, you'd be like, I'll check it out.
But
so on a like, for me, I put Stranger Things as like the best horror show as of like from that I've seen, because it was just the Duffler brothers did such an amazing job with it. Which I think in the future, when before season 5 comes out, we should do a rewatch. And
yeah, because I don't remember what the heck happened, because it's been
3 years,
forever.
We should do a rewatch and then give our predictions for season 5. I'm on the Reddit page for Stranger Things, so people have been doing that for the last 2 years. So
yeah,
I think it'd be fun to do. If you'd like to see that, let us know about down below. I would say 7.5, 8. Like, it wasn't Stranger Things.
Yeah.
But it was very well written. The character arcs were good. It was easy to follow. It wasn't too detailed. And when I say it wasn't too detailed, I mean, like, go watch, what's that movie? Inception.
Oh, yeah.
Where it gets to a point where it's like, all right, dude, like, you're in a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. Like, okay, whatever. It wasn't overly complex. The characters were believable. Like, I could see CJ being a delivery driver and kind of a goofy person.
Yeah.
It was very well casted, and of course, I've never read the book they based that off of. Maybe I should check that out. But from a sheer entertainment point, if you like something that's spooky but not like super scary,
there's not really any jump scares. There's not a whole lot of gore apart from those couple of scenes that we mentioned.
It had a good
balance. I don't know if you would even consider that gore. Yeah. I know something that you didn't like.
Oh, I was about to bring it up too.
The false endings?
Oh my god, they love false endings in that show. Like, maybe it was because they cut it for commercials, but when you're watching it with, like, on a streaming platform,
I don't even think it was for that.
There was just a lot of false endings.
Yeah, so what we mean by that is, like when a TV show is over or even a movie's over,
it'll cut
the music
black.
kind of changes, it kind of dims out, the screen goes black.
And you expect credits to roll.
And you'd be like, all right, honestly, that would have been a good ending to that episode. Not even mad about it.
But then 30 seconds goes by and they're
more
playing
music starts
else.
playing and you're following Cece around or something.
And it's like, there's so many ways to cut scene to scene. And that to me was just, it took a little bit off. So I think a 7.5 rating is probably, because that was really, like, the continuity error with it not being summertime, like, obvious not summertime. Like, I can get over that.
Yeah.
But the false freaking endings were just, ugh, they got really old.
Yeah.
But those are really my only two gripes with it.
Yeah, I was trying to think of anything.
Like the music choice for like the age of the kids in the show, like it made sense. So.
We joked about how difficult it was to try to watch Devin flirt with Frankie, but I don't think that's
I think that's just part of his character.
Yeah, it's just part of his character. But we were like, this is painful to watch.
Like it was
just
bad.
say it.
It was bad. But it was believable. Like here's a girl that he really likes and he's trying to like ask her out and he's just having like a hard time doing it.
Yeah.
So it played into his character very well. But yeah, I mean those were really the only gripes I had with the whole series was the false freaking, like if they did one or two false endings, like
kind of keep you on your toes. That's understandable. But it was like every episode.
Yeah, it was every episode pretty much almost every time they had a cut.
Yeah.
Like a major cut. So if they're going from like you said, it'll be Devin and Frankie talking and then something happens and it'll go to black. And then you're walking with Cece.
Yeah.
And it's just like
something else that we kind of had fun with. This isn't a gripe, it's just the nature of it. How the adults knew what was going on or had an idea, and the kids had an idea, but they didn't know that each other knew, so they were trying to be like, it's almost like, I don't know, do you know something? I don't know, do you know something? And we're sitting there like, if you would work together, you're actually both dealing with the same thing. Maybe we could come to a conclusion.
Well, that, you can rationalize that, like the parents are wanting to keep the kids safe, and the kids don't want to tell the parents because they don't want to get in trouble.
That's what I was saying. That's not really a gripe. That's just part of the show. But we were both just sitting there like...
I think they did it to try to add comedic relief, which in some instances worked, but in some instances just kind of got old. Like, yeah, all right, we've seen this song and dance before. We need to watch season 1, though. We need to find and watch season 1 to see how that one was.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, season 1 is what propelled them to do the second season. So I would imagine it being pretty good.
I feel like it's probably, like I said, I don't know anything. I know absolutely nothing about the Goosebumps books or the original stuff at all. But I assume that they're based on different books, so they're not going to coincide at all.
Yeah. And that's why we decided to move forward with this episode, because if they were to coincide, we wouldn't have. Maybe they do, and we're just speaking out of term here.
This is also possible. I've gotten good old Matthew has given me an earful about our Deadpool and Wolverine review.
Yeah, Matt was not a big fan of that one.
It's because it's one of his favorite movies.
Again, Matt, just to reiterate, like, maybe we should have watched the other ones. We went into it not knowing a damn thing about Deadpool or Wolverine, so... And it wasn't a bad movie. It just there's parts of it that were just like, oh, this is getting old.
I'm sorry. I will say it straight up out loud. It was a bad movie.
She said it, Matt, not me. But no, I think doing an episode before Stranger Things season 5 comes out with our predictions, because like that would be fun, and I think it's a series that both of us enjoyed.
Yeah.
Again, Taylor is not like a big horror, scary person.
It took me a while to get into Stranger Things.
Yeah. I got into it like 2 episodes in. I was like, oh, I'm hooked.
When did it first come out? It was before we got together, technically, wasn't it?
I think so.
Because I feel like I started to try to watch it, and I was watching the first episode, and I was like, nope, not for me. It looks too scary.
Yeah, it came out in July of 2016.
Okay.
So it was the year before we got together.
And then we ended up watching it after it had come out.
Yeah, we watched season 1, and then like 2 days or 3 days later, season 2 came out. And then season 3 came out like 3 years later.
Yep.
So that was painful.
And now here we are.
Season 4, parts 1 and 2. Which I kind of like how they did that. But at the same time, I was like... Speaking of Stranger Things, you know, like... I can really make that connection now that I've watched something based off of R.L. Stine. Which I'm sure I've watched something based off him before and just don't remember. But when season 4 of Stranger Things came out, and people would ask me about it, I would say seasons 1 through 3 are like an R.L. Stine book.
Mm-hmm.
Or like Goosebumps. Like, scary, but not too over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Season 4 was a freaking Stephen King novel. There are scenes in season 4 that just like... You would legitimately, like, your stomach gets uneasy and you kind of cringe a little bit just because, like, oh, watching a bone snap in that direction is just awful. And the sound is just like, oh.
Yeah.
It got brutal. But it's cool that they did it like that. Like,
Yeah.
they kind of turned it up a little bit to show, like, hey, like, you've seen the Demogorgon, you've seen the Mind Flayer, like, you've seen these. Here's the OG. The cool thing with Stranger Things is that all of the characters are based off of somebody from Dungeons and Dragons. And they really correlated it well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you'd like us to do that, I don't remember when Stranger Things season 5 is supposed to come out. I think it's next year. I'm looking it up now.
I don't know. Probably when we're dead.
They'll be in their 40s. Release date, not in India. It's set to be released this year. End of this year, November. Which kind of goes with, they released it in the summer and they also released it Halloween time. So, or right after Halloween. There is another series that is supposed to come out this year that I think we should watch and do a review on because we've seen all the movies and I'm currently listening to the book. And that's Welcome to Derry. They're doing a TV series based off of Stephen King's It. And the really cool part is Bill Skarsgård, the guy who plays Pennywise in the newer movies, is going to be Pennywise in the show.
Gotcha.
So it'll be interesting how they
incorporate
that. And so that, I can't remember when that's supposed to come out. It's supposed to be this year. I just don't remember exactly when. I think it's somewhat soon. I'm looking it up now. Welcome to Derry. Release date. Sometime in 2025.
Cool. Great.
So could be today, could be in 9 months, for
Yep.
all we know. But no, I think both of us really enjoyed that series. We're going to check out season 1 for sure, just to get a feel for that. But if you'd like us to do that review and give our predictions for what happens in season 5 of Stranger Things, just let us know by leaving a comment.
Yeah, well, I think we'll do a little bit more preparing on our side of things because I feel like I don't know how I feel about how this episode panned out.
I think it was all right.
Yeah, I think we just need to like write down
Like
specifics.
actually do some notes.
Yeah. So, well, we're figuring it out.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
also really tired too, so it's like hard to think.
maybe we won't do it after a 5-hour drive.
Like I said, I was driving this time, so I didn't realize how tired I was until we got home, and now I'm like, yep, I could take a nap right now.
Yeah, I think you're probably gonna pass out after we get done with this.
We gotta eat dinner.
I'm not even hungry.
Of course you're not.
Either way, if you'd like us to do that for Stranger Things, let us know. Another podcast idea I had, and this kind of goes based off the Mandela Effect podcast, is I kind of want to do one about a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about that before. So there's a few that I've looked up that are really interesting that I think would be fun to explore. But
What do you guys think?
should we
Did
do
we
one?
go to the moon?
That's one of the ones. I mean, there's some that are like,
Is COVID-19 real?
oh my god, you must have read the same list I did because you're talking. I was literally looking that up in the comments.
Is Bigfoot real? That's not a conspiracy.
Yeah, Bigfoot's real, and I want to drink a beer with him. Somebody can send Bigfoot a postcard. Just let him know Pathu wants to have a cold one with them. Greatly appreciate it. We are working on getting our first guest for the podcast. There's some technical things I need to figure out on my end, and we also need to set a date for that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a Tuesday episode because I've already written it as a Tuesday episode. So either way, if you guys have listened this far, we greatly appreciate you guys checking us out, and thank you again for being understanding with us about not having a Thursday episode. Things like that happen, and you just gotta kind of roll with the punches. Of course, if something like that pops up and we're not able to make an episode, I will shoot an update on the YouTube channel. In the future, going forward, I'll also throw it on Instagram just so we're kind of covering our bases. Speaking of which, if you haven't followed us on TikTok, you can find us at Who Even Are We Podcast, and on Instagram at Who Even Are We Pod. The link for both of those is in the description. If you prefer to check us out on Spotify, the link to our Spotify page is also in the channel description, or the description on Spotify if you want to check us out on YouTube. If you are on Spotify wanting to listen to us on YouTube, just fair warning, it's exactly the same. There's just a picture that goes along with it. So that's really the only difference at this point in time. But if you like this episode, please let us know by leaving a comment, liking the video. Share this with your friends. Let them know that we're out there. If you have any suggestions for episodes or things you'd like us to discuss or talk about or, go over, we're not afraid to talk about. We're not afraid to talk about anything, pretty much.
Yeah.
We'll always try to be respectful of others, though, and again, we've talked politics, but I think we try to stay as objective as possible. I think that's the one kind of topic that we try to not get too much into. Hasn't worked out great all the time, but it's okay. But again, follow us, subscribe, whatever you do, share this where you share cool stuff. And until Thursday, we will see you guys on Thursday with the next episode.
Peace out.